Nobody talks about how hard it is to forgive people who are not sorry. How hard it is to forgive people that deliberately hurt you and betray you. How hard it is to forgive people who you can forgive today and they do the exact same thing tomorrow. And I was talking to my best friend about how, I forgive people in my heart and I release them, but I never involve myself with them again. So I had to ask myself, well, is it true forgiveness if I say I forgive them in my heart, I'm no longer angry, but I treat them differently, or I treat them like they no longer exist? Whereas she said, like, in her forgiveness now, sometimes she'll forgive, right? And still continue to love them the way that she would naturally love them, but she would still be angry in her heart. And I say, well, is that true forgiveness? If you're going to change the way you treat people, or if you're going to still be mad in your heart but still treat them the same, is either of those things true forgiveness? And then I had to consider Jesus, how Jesus knew that Judas would betray him, as he still loved him so well and still forgave him to the point where nobody knew that he would be the one that would betray him. And here I am sitting before God, right? And I'm like, Lord, I want to know how you forgive. And he began to show me how my grandmother always say, they don't know no better. They don't know no better. You got to ignore people. You got to forgive them. I'd be like, Granny, when you say that, it sounds like you're enabling, you're justifying bad behavior. You're letting them off the hook. But then yesterday, God convicted my heart and he took me to when Jesus said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And I say, my granny always say they don't know no better. Is this what Jesus meant? But while Jesus is being condemned, crucified, they're ripping his beard out. They're whipping him to chunks of skin coming out of his body. They're making him carry this cross for miles and miles. They're putting a crown of thorns on his head, piercing his hands, piercing his feet. And yet he is on this cross dying. And he's saying, forgive them, Father. They don't know what they are doing. What do you mean they don't know what they're doing? They're deliberately doing this to you, purposely doing this to you, and you are saying, forgive them, Father. They don't know what they are doing. What do you mean? And so that's why I'm like, it's hard for me to forgive, because I feel like people should know better. But the truth is, they don't. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. And if you think about who you used to be and how far God brought you from point A to point B, if you look at what you used to do, you didn't know what you were doing. And this is why we have to forgive. Because we're not forgiving bad behavior. We're forgiving them because they genuinely don't know what they are doing. It is written that we are to forgive 70 times 7. And I'm like, God, how are we supposed to forgive that many times? How are we supposed to forgive people that ain't sorry? People that keep doing things on purpose? People that you forgive today for one thing and they do it again and again and again and again. And he showed me how when you begin to forgive someone for a thing, right? Or when you bring up something that somebody did that might have been offensive or that might have hurt you, they might have been doing that thing for a certain amount of time, let's say 20 years before they got pointed out for that offensive thing. And it's going to take them a while to get that thing right. So for example, you grew up being a liar your whole life, right? And then eventually God began to point out in you that you are a liar. From the time that you get that thing pointed out, it's going to take a while for you to finally stop doing that. And it takes time because at first you didn't even know you were doing it. It was like breathing. It was like second nature, right? So then when God points that thing out to you and it begins to be a conviction for you, you start to become hyper aware. And that's where shame is associated, because God, I don't want to lie anymore, but it just keeps happening. It just keeps coming out. I don't want to offend you, Lord, but it just keeps happening. I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to get it right. And then when they finally stop lying, right? And they finally begin to tell the truth, they still tell truth and half truths because they're still learning how to perfect that thing. If you start off at a negative 100, right? Even when you get to 0, that's a process of transformation because you were at negative 100. And this is why long suffering and forgiveness and forgiving 70 times 7 is so important. It's because by the time you've forgiven that person 70 times 7, those will become some of the most loyal and faithful people that you have ever met because they know they've been forgiven much. And if you think about your personal testimony with God, if God would have abandoned you while you were in the process of transformation, who would you be today? If God would have been like, you know what, you messed up too many times, I'm done with this, and he would have took his hands off you, how would you have been able to transform the way you have? I'm saying all that to say this: forgive them because they don't know what they do. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Most times what you think is a person doing a thing to you, it is those demonic strongholds and those principalities that are at work. And I remember when they used to be at work in me. I know that they've been at work in you. We have all fallen short of the glory of God. We have all made a lot of mistakes. And if God were to stop forgiving you because he got tired of your mistakes, who would you be? But if we don't forgive, how can God forgive us? Jesus had it worse than anybody who walks this earth. And yet he forgave. And yet he gave his life in exchange for the same people that were deliberately hurting him. Deliberately, like purposely. He's saying, forgive them, Father. They don't know what they are doing. To this day, people rejecting him and spitting on him and crucifying him all over again. Not understanding his sacrifice or his love or his mercies or his miracles. To this day. And yet, forgiveness is available for everyone who will be willing to receive it. Now, when you forgive, this does not mean change will take place. This does not mean that people will stop being who they are. But what it means is you won't compromise your relationship with God. You won't compromise your individual character. You won't compromise the calling that's on your life because you understand that they don't know what they do. And that's what the enemy wants us to do. Don't forgive, because he knows that if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. And God deals with me on this every day because I've been so strict with people, because I've been putting them at the same standard at which I am. Like, I would never do that. I'm not fooling with them because I wouldn't do that to them. But it's like they don't know what they are doing. Maybe your job is to teach them. Maybe your job is to just love them, to pray for them, in spite of what they do. I know this was a long message, but I hope it helps you today. And I love you.